GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM. I'm Darren McCaffrey. We've got a pretty busy show over the next hour. Has Boris Johnson abandoned the North? It's been branded as the great train robbery this morning. We'll be looking at the details of the new £96 billion investment plan for trains in the north of England, many claiming it doesn't go far enough. Also, new laws being discussed in Parliament aimed at tackling dog theft and outlawing conversion therapy. We'll be debating whether the current proposals are the right course of action. That and much more. It's going to be a busy programme. But first, the news at 3 with Simon.
Thank you very much, Darren. I am Simon Pusey. This is your news at 3 o'clock. The Prime Minister has said it's a total rubbish to suggest that levelling up is being derailed by plans to scrap the eastern leg of the HS2 high-speed rail line. The government unveiled its £96 billion integrated rail plan this morning. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused Boris Johnson of having let down everybody in the north with the scaled-back plans.
Bradford's been betrayed and the north of England have been betrayed because the Prime Minister made two very important promises. HS2 all the way to Leeds, a new line. That promise has been ripped up. He also promised the Northern Powerhouse Rail a new line from Manchester to Leeds, and that plan's been ripped up. This was the first test of levelling up, and the government has completely failed.
Sir Keir Starmer speaking a little earlier, but the Prime Minister says Leeds will be connected to HS2 in the future.
There are lots of people who say, well, look, what we should do is carve huge new railways through virgin territory, smashing through unspoilt countryside and villages, and do it all at once. Now, the problem with that is those extra high-speed lines take decades, and they don't deliver the commuter benefits that I'm talking about. We will eventually do them.
A public inquiry will be held following the death of Dawn Sturges, who was unwittingly poisoned by Novichok in 2018. Home Secretary Priti Patel has granted permission to convert the inquest into a public inquiry to better examine any possible Russian involvement. Ms. Sturges died after the substance was used in an attempt to poison the former Russian spy Sergei Skripal. A man who killed a university worker and seriously injured 7 others in a knife attack has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 21 years. Zephaniah McLeod will initially serve his sentence at a high-security hospital. He carried out a spate of knife attacks in Birmingham city centre in September last year. The Women's Tennis Association has cast doubt on the veracity of a letter which has been attributed to a missing Chinese tennis player. Peng Shuai hasn't been seen since she accused a senior Chinese government official of sexual assault. Chinese state media have published a letter in which she purportedly says, "I'm not missing, nor am I unsafe. I've just been resting at home and everything is fine." Alec Baldwin is facing a second lawsuit over the fatal shooting on the film set Rust. Crew member Mamie Mitchell claims the script never called for a gun to be fired during the scene where cinematographer Helena Hutchins was shot and killed. She's called the incident a tragedy that has left her feeling depressed and unsafe.
I'll never forget what happened on the set of Rust that day. I relived the shooting and the sound of the explosion from the gun over and over again. I'm depressed. I don't feel safe. I feel like at any moment anything could happen to me. This violent tragedy has taken away the joy in my life.
The Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall have travelled to Egypt for the second leg of their Middle East tour. Charles and Camilla spent the past 2 days touring Jordan, where the Prince praised the country's relationship with the UK in a speech marking the 100th anniversary of the founding of the nation. In Egypt, the visit will include a reception overlooking the pyramids in Giza to celebrate the bond between the two countries and a tour of the ancient city of Alexandria. And ahead of the Beijing Winter Olympics next year, China may have a new star in the making. Videos of what's now known as the snowboarding baby have quickly gone viral in the country. Her parents decided to learn skiing during the winter season, and they wanted to include their baby in on the fun too. And with footage like this, despite being just 11 months old, Wang Yuji may just be on the path to stardom. Fell over though, so needs to stay on that snowboard to have a chance of getting into the Chinese team. That's it from me. I'll be back within about half an hour. Now let's get back to Darren McCaffrey with the briefing.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis. I'm Darren McCaffrey. Here's what's coming up over the next hour. The £96 billion boost to Northern Rail and a chance to level up. Or is it? Well, I'll be speaking to a Redwall MP who's welcomed the plans, but also a local politician from Bradford who thinks his town has been let down. And Parliament's efforts to tackle dog theft. Will the new law being introduced in Parliament stop this horrific crime? Or is it a transparent attempt to win some positive PR for the government? And banning so-called conversion therapy. Is a rebellion brewing in Parliament because of the new law? We'll be debating essentially what should happen and what the government should do. We'll be hearing from both sides of the argument. And any of those stories, as always, we want to hear from you. Do email me your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBNews. A very good afternoon and welcome to the programme. A very good afternoon and welcome. Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, has confirmed that the eastern leg of HS2 will be scrapped between the East Midlands and Leeds in a major revision to the government's original plans. However, the integrated rail plan, he revealed in the Commons, represents a £96 billion investment, he claims, in the Midlands and the North, which he called one of the biggest single acts of levelling up of any government in history. So, has the government, as the opposition claim, broken a key levelling up promise to the regions, or delivered a smarter, more efficient rail plan which can be delivered in half the time, as the Transport Secretary would like us to believe? Well, later we'll be speaking to a Redwall Tory MP who's welcomed the plans and opposed an extension to HS2. But first of all, let's get the latest from our Midlands reporter who is out and about. But before that, let's get the latest from what Grant Shapps had to say in the Commons.
Today I'm proud to announce our integrated rail plan, a £96 billion programme which will transform rail services in the North and the Midlands, providing faster journeys, increased capacity, more frequent services, up to 10 years sooner than previously planned. Mr. Speaker, this new blueprint delivers 3 high-speed lines. First, that's Crewe to Manchester. Second, Birmingham to the East Midlands, with HS2 trains continuing to central Nottingham and central Derby, Chesterfield and Sheffield on an upgraded main line. And third, a brand new high-speed line from Warrington to Manchester and to the western border of Yorkshire, slashing journey times across the north.
I'm frankly staggered by the way this statement started, that he was proud to present this to the House. Proud of what? The betrayal of trust, the betrayal of promises, and the betrayal of investment the North of England and the Midlands deserve. He promised HS2 to Leeds. He promised Northern Powerhouse Rail. He promised that the North would not be forgotten. But he hasn't just forgotten us, he's completely sold us out. Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. The scaling back of Northern Powerhouse Rail, coupled with the scrapping of the eastern leg of HS2, is a massive blow for our regions. Both schemes would have created 150,000 new jobs, connecting 13 million people in our major towns, our cities and our industrial heartlands. Madam Deputy Speaker, Boris Johnson was elected on a promise to level the playing fields, to make things better for households across the country. We were promised a Northern Powerhouse. We were promised a Midlands engine to be levelled up. But what we've been given today is a great train robbery, robbing the North of its chance to realise its full potential, robbing the next generation of the hope and the opportunity they are due, and robbing 15 million people across the North of the investment that they've been denied for 11 years under this rotten government.
Well, I speak to Will Hollis, who's our East Midlands reporter and joins us now live. Good afternoon to you, Will. Just spell out the kind of details of what the government plan is, because in many ways it doesn't mean an awful lot of change for where you are in the East Midlands, but certainly does if you live beyond that in the North.
Good afternoon, Darren. Yes, significant changes to what's been promised over the last 10-year period. HS2 goes up from London towards Birmingham and then divides into a Y. We know that that western leg is pretty safe, but the eastern leg, which goes from Birmingham through Nottingham at the East Midlands hub, which was proposed for Towton, won't be going all the way to Leeds. Now, where I am here at East Midlands Parkway, which is pretty much the central point if you want to get away to Derby, Leicestershire, or even to Nottingham, this is now going to be the place where that East Midlands hub arrives when it does start to take place over the next few years. So, as you say, for the East Midlands, not a lot has changed. The plans have been moved around a little bit, but where we're seeing a lot of the trouble and a lot of upset, particularly for northern politicians, is places like Bradford, which feel like they've been totally betrayed. Bradford, one of the least connected and underfunded places in the entire country. They had such expectations for a high-speed line to go through there as part of the Northern Powerhouse Rail. That's not going to be happening today. There are some promises to electrify lines and create new regional links here in the East Midlands as well as in the North, but you can understand why people like Keir Starmer and a lot of northern politicians feel like they've been completely forgotten and completely thrown under the bus. And the quote, as you said earlier, from Jim McMahon, it feels like a great train robbery when for so long so much was promised, particularly regarding things like levelling up.
Well, just briefly, what's your sense of what people feel about this? As you say, we've heard from the politicians quite a lot in the last couple of hours or so. Have you any sense of what ordinary people in the Midlands and the North think about this? Do they think London gets too much money and too much investment when it comes to public transport? Or frankly, did they not want the disruption that HS2 on that eastern leg would involve to many of their neighbourhoods?
Well, I think you're completely right. There are kind of two sides to the coin in that there are a lot of people that would like better rail links down to London, but we know that most people, if they are going to travel via rail, is they'll do it to the next town or the next city, much shorter journeys than places like, let's say, Newcastle down to London. And that's what HS2 was really offering. One of the things that I think Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, referenced was that HS2 was putting a risk that it was just going to be a commuter line rather than actually levelling up different parts of the country. So maybe these regional links will give people what they want in that sense. But as you say, there are villages and towns that were going to be completely bulldozed by what HS2 was going to do, and people who maybe have businesses that were going to be moved along decades decades-old businesses, generational businesses, they've welcomed the news today that this won't be happening, and there's going to be a lot of happiness in groups like Stop HS2, the Wildlife Trust, which have been campaigning for many years to change these plans. There's going to be a lot of cheers on that side of the front.
OK, appreciate that analysis, Will. Thank you very much indeed. Will Hollis there, our East Midlands reporter, joining us. Now, as Will mentioned there, Bradford feels that it has lost out, and we'll be speaking actually to a local politician from Bradford in a couple of minutes. But first of all, unsurprisingly, Labour wanted to make some political capital out of this, and the Labour leader Keir Starmer travelled to Bradford a little bit earlier, essentially to try and slam the government.
Bradford's been betrayed and the north of England have been betrayed because the Prime Minister made two very important promises. HS2 all the way to Leeds, a new line. That promise has been ripped up. He also promised the Northern Powerhouse Rail, a new line from Manchester to Leeds, and that plan's been ripped up. This was the first test of levelling up, and the government has completely failed. And you don't have to drill down very long into that £96 billion sum to realise that most of that, or a good deal of that, is money already spent on the bit of the line that comes up to the Midlands.
Well, let's now speak to Conservative MP Alexander Stafford. Alexander, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that you welcome today's news. Just explain why.
Well, it's not just me who welcomes. I think the whole of South Yorkshire and definitely the whole of Rother Valley meet this news with jubilation. The 2B arm of HS2, which has been so destructive and so wasteful, has now been stopped. It's been a big campaign. We're going to save 400 homes. And we're going to get money, actual money we want, invested on real projects, not this massive white elephant that only benefits a few people who are based in Leeds city centre.
You say that, but at the end of the day, obviously, connection between major cities is incredibly important. Cities like Leeds and others are the backbone of our economy to a large degree. It's interesting, isn't it, the government today comparing this to what the Victorians did. I mean, the Victorians, I think we praise them because they went ahead and built massive infrastructure projects, not worrying about 400 homes here or there, because they realised it was best for the country at large.
Well, I don't think this is best for the country at large. I think it's best for maybe a couple of big businessmen in Leeds city centre. It doesn't actually give the connectivity, the intercity connectivity that you mentioned, that we actually want and they actually need. So in fact, it's great the government has stopped this ridiculously legacy project, a legacy project from the last Labour government. It actually said, let's move that money into something we actually want, some rail connectivity we would need, some of the buses we want, rather than us benefiting some vested interests and actually want to benefit the people. This is a great example of the government listening to actually what the voters want on the ground, rather than vested interests.
You say this is the government listening. Let's listen, actually, while we can, to what Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, had to say a couple of years ago about this railway service.
I want to be the Prime Minister who does with Northern Powerhouse Rail what we did for Crossrail in London. And today, I am going to deliver on my commitment to that vision with a pledge to fund the Leeds to Manchester route. And I know that's the bit, Mr. Mayor, that you particularly want. But I want to stress it's going to be up to local people to decide what comes next. And as far as I'm concerned, that is just the beginning of our commitments and our investments. We want to see this whole thing done.
Alexander, it's difficult to listen to that. You'll argue, oh, he's listened to people like you and others. But frankly, for many, it's yet again another broken promise, isn't it?
Not in the slightest. Remember, when HS2 was originally passed in Parliament, it cost 30 billion. At the moment, it's finished at 150 billion, 4 times as much as originally planned. It's spiraled out of control. It's a wasteful organisation. And in fact, let's put the money, like this government's now going to do, into actual connectivity, rather than just throwing good money after bad. There's a big difference between spending and investment. HS2 was spending a lot of money, but wasn't investing in our area.
But it's still a broken promise. I mean, you either promise to do something and then don't deliver it, or you promise to do something and you do deliver it. He's not delivering it, so it's a broken promise.
Well, I wouldn't say a broken promise. It's actually listening to people, actually listening to what the people want on the ground. Lest we forget the Prime Minister came in 2019. This is a legacy project, a hangover from Labour and then David Cameron. And actually, we get a lot of representations from people who live in the areas. Actually, this is not what we need. This is a better option. This is a better way forward. So actually, this is improving on what we wanted and getting rid of this awful project. We shouldn't be a slave to the past. We shouldn't be slave to a bad decision of the past. We should make the good decisions for the future of our areas. So this is great news.
So anytime the Prime Minister promises anything in the future, we can just conclude that, well, we don't know, he may well change his mind, he may well listen to people in the future. I mean, it is interesting. It's not just one manifesto promise that's been broken. I mean, there is a whole litany of them. And frankly, it does, and this is quite a serious point, it does kind of question people's trust in politicians, in which they seemingly say things before an election, and then a couple of years down the line, they don't fulfil those promises.
Well, I think we've got to be realistic. We didn't expect a once-in-a-100-year global pandemic to be anyone's manifesto, so spending commitments have changed, society has changed, the world has changed. Would you rather a government that actually carries on blindly down a bad path, a wrong path, because circumstances have changed, or rather a government that actually listens, they actually, we need to make changes, we need to improve things, we need to make things better. I'd rather go a government that listens to people and listens to the current economic and financial situation, rather than just blindly going down a sort of a dark rabbit warren, which can only lead to damnation.
We've said that we've been focusing, of course, on the eastern leg of HS2. What about the integrated rail services as part of the Northern Powerhouse Rail? In that, clearly, again, it's not quite what we all envisaged or were promised, and that is proper connectivity between some of the big northern cities, Bradford, for example, being left out. Surely, how can that be part of the levelling up of the north of England when you're not going to invest in connectivity between cities in the north of England?
Well, I can speak for South Yorkshire, and actually we're getting increased connectivity. If you saw, we're still getting the speed, the increase in speed and the decrease in time from Sheffield down to London, which is great. We cut that by 31 minutes under the programmes. We're getting the electrified Trans-Pennine route, which is great. The upgrading of the Hope Valley route to Manchester, which is a great thing. So actually, it is providing more connectivity and increased connectivity. So I think for South Yorkshire, I can speak on, is a great boom, and we're so glad that HS2 is being binned.
Just very finally, what we got you, Alexander. You talked about the Prime Minister listening to you and your constituents and others. Is the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary listening when it comes to migrants across the English Channel? We're now looking at, 25,000 this year. We're looking at thousands arriving on a weekly basis, and yet the government seems entirely impotent in trying to stop this, even though they claim they want to stop it.
Well, let's be honest, the small boat crisis, the illegal immigration crisis, is a crisis, a national crisis, something we haven't seen before, and something we need to crack down on. And that's why, thankfully, we've got the Borders Immigration Bills coming through Parliament, which will allow us to actually deport some of these people, stop some of these people. And it's disgraceful that Labour is actually opposing it. Labour are trying to stop us cracking down on it. But I'm quite positive to see in the news that all options have been considered, including offshoring some of it. And that worked, as we saw in Australia in 2014, that really cut down their problem completely to nothing. And the papers today were talking about maybe offshoring it to Albania. And once you've showed these illegal immigrants that if you come over here, you're going to be deported to a different country to be processed, it's going to massively cut down on the illegal immigration. And that is right. So it's great the government is looking at all opportunities. I think we definitely need to process these illegal immigrants offshore.
Well, the Albanians seem to think some of the reporting around that was so-called fake news. But even if it wasn't, what we talk about wasting taxpayers' money, 100 grand? 100 grand for each migrant to send them to Albania to process their application, twice as much as it costs to keep someone in a prison. How is that a justifiable use of taxpayers' money? £100,000 per person?
Well, I haven't seen that stat, but if that's true, that is an absurdly high amount. However, I think we can get down a lot lower. And do you know what? Can you put a price on our border security, on the protection and maintaining our border? I think we should spend what we need to crack down on this crisis, to stop the illegal immigrants coming over, and to protect lives. People are dying in the channel, people are being exploited by people smugglers, criminal gangs. Anything we do to stop this criminality is good.
OK, really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. That's Alexander Stafford there, a Conservative MP, joining us from Parliament. Right, we're going to pause there on GB News and the briefing. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about conversion therapy, whether that is the right way forward, the debate that's taking place in Parliament. Does the law go too far? Also, we've got a press conference, hopefully live, with some of the Northern Mayors talking about what the government announced today on rail. All that, and also dogs. Lots of cute pictures of dogs. You won't miss that and much more in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's go over to Exeter and get the weather this afternoon from the Met Office.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. There is a lot of cloud out there this afternoon and some rain in places, but it's also very mild. The weather at the moment coming from the west, it's a mild direction, and with a strong wind across the northern half of the country, that is bringing in a lot of cloud and also some persistent rain associated with these weather fronts that are close to the far north of Scotland, and it stays damp there overnight with the wind, if anything, strengthening, pushing the wet and windy weather into Shetland for a time. Gales and 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts for exposed parts of Shetland. Further outbreaks of rain into the north of Scotland by the end of the night as well. But otherwise, a lot of cloud for much of the UK. Some rain and drizzle for western hills and coasts, and staying mild with that breeze and with that cloud cover. There will be some breaks in the cloud first thing Friday, say towards central and increasingly eastern and northern areas, so northwest England could brighten up by the afternoon, for example. In many places there'll be a bit more sunshine compared to today, but for Scotland it stays cloudy, windy and in places damp, especially the far north. Another mild day is expected. 13, 14 Celsius generally. Again, we're likely to see something around 16 degrees for parts of eastern and northeastern Scotland, given the wind warming up as it pushes over the higher ground to the west. And the wet and windy weather continues for the north of Scotland into Friday night. But then things start to change. For Saturday, this weather front begins to sink south, and as it does so, it will introduce colder air, but Saturday certainly starts off mild across the country, cloudy again for most areas, with only some late brightness coming along for Scotland and Northern Ireland behind this weather front. So really, Saturday is a day of change with that weather front sinking south, introducing eventually clearer skies, but also much lower temperatures. Those temperatures back to around average for Sunday and Monday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Very welcome back to the briefing, coming up to 3:30 on this Thursday afternoon. Thank you for your company. Now, as we say, in the East Midlands is going to be largely unaffected, and other towns like Sheffield will only have the journey times to Birmingham and London marginally increased under the government's new rail plans announced today. Some local links will be delivered quicker. However, Leeds could be badly hit, and many people are saying that worst off of all will be Bradford, the largest city in the UK to lack a major rail terminal. Well, join me now is Jack Morton. He's a candidate for the Bradford Conservatives and Secretary for the party in the city. Good afternoon to you, Jack. You're not a happy chappy today, are you?
Not particular. I mean, obviously we would like greater investment in Bradford. The fact that they have given some promises for improvements to commuter times, you know, cutting down the time to 12 minutes from Bradford to Leeds is good. It's kind of a mixed bag, really.
A mixed bag, but at the same time, you know, Bradford, as I was just saying, the largest city in the UK without a major rail terminal. I mean, that's not going to help Bradford get on the economic map, is it?
Not having a major rail terminal isn't one of Bradford's biggest issues. I mean, Bradford Council itself needs to look at some of its more fundamental issues within the city that can be addressed much easier than having a brand new rail link. We've got links to Leeds, we've got links to Manchester. They're not the best, but they are there.
I've been on them. It feels like you're stuck most of the time in a couple of carriages that are largely full and move like a bus on two tracks. I mean, it's not great when you compare it to London and the South East, where I live. And isn't that the problem, is that the Conservatives promise they want to level up, but frankly, many people look at this plan today and say it's just not going to happen. It's all words.
The HS2 link going to Leeds would have just gone to Leeds. Bradford, many times over, has come second to Leeds, especially within the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. Bradford always seems to become second, and that, for me, is that it's underrepresented by the Labour Council. I mean, a good example of that, obviously, is Keir Starmer stood in Bradford Interchange today, yet not one of the Bradford Labour MPs was stood up in Parliament questioning this decision. Bradford is underrepresented, and that comes through in Labour's actions. They're all doing it for the media coverage, but when it comes to actually representing Bradford in Parliament, they're not there.
Do you think Conservative MPs are doing a better job then of representing northern constituencies in Parliament? I mean, pretty annoyed about this announcement today.
They are, and Robbie Moore made some very valid points when he stood up in Parliament, and, you know, rightly so. He's speaking for the people of Bradford. But Bradford's made up of 5 constituencies, and the 3 Labour ones, not one of their MPs turned up.
Just finally on all of this, you know, many people have been pointing today to what the Prime Minister said a couple of years ago about this rail plan, particularly the one that's, you know, across the north of England, you know, from Hull right through to Liverpool, and its different variations, and they feel let down today. Are you convinced that at the next election you'll be able to point to something tangible and say, well, the Conservatives are genuinely levelling up in the north of England?
I am confident that there's going to be the investment there. The difficulty with Bradford is that the money is given to the council, and even the council can't tell you where they've put it. So it's tough for a Conservative MP up in the north to say, you know, we're delivering on these promises when they are fighting against Labour policies that are being put out on a local level.
Jack, really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you for your time this afternoon. That's Jack Morton, who's from the Bradford Conservative Party. He's in a bit of a mixed bag today in terms of the government announcements. Right, we're going to pause there on GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be talking about conversion therapy, big debates in Parliament about that, and also the protection given to dogs, with lots of cute pictures of puppies. We won't want to miss that. But first, let's get the news just after 3:30. Here's Simon again.
Thanks, Darren. I am Simon Pewes, and here are your latest headlines. The Prime Minister has said it's total rubbish to suggest that levelling up is being derailed by plans to scrap the eastern leg of the high-speed rail line. He was speaking during a visit to a Network Rail hub in North Yorkshire as the government unveiled its £96 billion integrated rail plan. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has accused Boris Johnson of having let everyone down in the north by scrapping the HS2 extension to Leeds and scaling down Northern Powerhouse Rail. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has announced that a public inquiry will be held following the death of Dawn Sturgis, who was poisoned by Novichok in Wiltshire in 2018. She died after the substance was used in an attempt to poison the former Russian spy Sergei Skripal. A man who killed a university worker and seriously injured 7 others in a knife attack has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 21 years. Zephaniah McLeod will initially serve his sentence at a high-security hospital. His stabbing attack occurred in Birmingham city centre in September last year. The Women's Tennis Association says it's even more concerned about a missing Chinese tennis player following the publication of a letter said to be from her. Peng Shuai hasn't been seen since she accused a senior Chinese government official of sexual assault. In a letter published by Chinese state media, she purportedly says, "I'm not missing, nor am I unsafe. I've just been resting at home and everything is fine." And videos of what's known as the snowboarding baby have gone viral in China ahead of the Winter Olympics next year. Her parents decided to learn skiing during the winter season, and they wanted to include her in the fun too. And with footage like this, despite being just 11 months old, Wang Yuji may just be on the path to stardom. We'll have a full update for you at the top of the hour. Now let's get back to Darren.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. Let's go live now to a press conference that's taking place among some of the big mayors in the north of England reacting to that government announcement on rail. Let's listen in to a couple of minutes to see what they're saying about that announcement today.
transport revolution, getting people and freight away from our roads and onto railways. People across the north were excited by the opportunities these new rail links would bring. They do not deserve more broken promises from the Prime Minister. But we, obviously, northern leaders, we're not going to let them down. We'll not let this pared-back plan hold us back. Here in West Yorkshire, we've an internationally significant economy with an output of £55.4 billion, bigger than 9 European countries. 2.3 million people live here. There is endless potential for our economy to grow, and we'll not let the government dull our aspirations and our ambition for West Yorkshire. We, as Northern mayors standing as one, will never stop making the case for the North. But we want parliamentarians to have their chance to do the same. That's why we've written a joint letter with other leaders from across the North, calling on the Prime Minister to offer a free vote in a free vote in Parliament on the integrated rail plan. In our view, all MPs should have the chance to vote against these piecemeal proposals that are not in their best interests. So, just for clarity, we're going to put on screen the map from government's document today to see just how disconnected this supposed integrated rail plan actually is. As you can see, Leeds gets very little, Sheffield the same, Newcastle even less, which is why it is really important that we all speak as one. We all are interconnected, we all need each other, and the potential for all of us across the North is absolutely limitless. So if I could now hand over to Dan for his thoughts on the plan and what it means for South Yorkshire. Thank you. Over to you, Dan.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and thank you for bringing us together today. Today we should have been having a very different conversation. Today should have been a landmark moment for the North, the moment the government finally showed the courage to fix one of the greatest injustices in our country, fixing the generational and deep inequality between our regions and the chronic underinvestment in our people and our economy. It should have been a day to unlock our potential, but instead, I think that we've seen a package of broken promises, re-announcements and spin. Be very clear. Today's announcement is bad news for passengers, it is bad news for businesses, and it is bad news for the North. The Prime Minister is fooling nobody if he thinks that people in South Yorkshire and across the North will believe that this is a good deal. So let me be clear about what today's announcement means for South Yorkshire. It's a lot of pain for precious little gain. Sheffield and Leeds, the two biggest cities in Yorkshire, are no closer to getting faster or more frequent services. It's just not acceptable that our two powerhouse cities have one fast service an hour, taking 40 minutes. Today's announcement does nothing to change that. A new line from the Clayton Junction is nowhere to be seen, and a vague promise of electrification and faster journey times have vanished. This appears to row back from the briefing to the media just over the weekend. It says a lot when the government's own leak to the media...
That was Dan Jarvis there, who is, of course, the Mayor of South Yorkshire. We heard from Tracy Brabham a little bit earlier, the West Yorkshire Mayor, talking about the government's plans when it comes to rail. Clearly not very happy about that. We'll keep you across that and bring you some of the further details a little later this afternoon here on GB News. But let's move on to the political week that Boris Johnson has had. Has it been a great week? Well, many people look at the end of COP26 saying it wasn't quite the triumph he'd hoped for when it came to that. Obviously, he's had to deal with the whole fallout from so-called sleaze. The stories didn't go away this week, did they, in that large regard? And then there are, frankly, some Conservative MPs who aren't terribly happy with what's been announced today. What do we make of it all? Is it a significant blip or not? Well, delighted to say that we're joined by journalist Georgia Gilhooly. Apologise, Georgia. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. What do you make of the Prime Minister's week? I've just listed out a litany there of things that may not have reflected too badly, not too well on him. What's your judgments on this?
Yeah, so I think that obviously with these kinds of things, the long-term impact is hard to tell. And I think that one of the sort of factors at play as to whether this will, affect the next general election, for example, is if Labour are able to provide a credible alternative vision for the country when it comes to, I guess, the sleaze issues, also the economy. And I think over the weekend we did see a bit of a dip in 3 polls for the Tories, sort of on the back of that. And of course, that was before sort of the events of this week. We've seen a lot of backlash against the Integrated Rail Plan launch today, which obviously has scrapped a big part of the HS2 plan. And I think that one of the things that comes into my head when I think about, let's say, the arguments over the Northern Powerhouse is realistically whether they spend more on HS2 or less, or they scrap this or that part of it. One of the main things just sticking in my head is, you know, in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, which technically is still going on, we still have certain restrictions. The government could actually bring in more restrictions again, which was obviously include a big impact on business as it has previously. One of the things in my head is, you know, we have soaring energy costs. Yesterday, the ONS obviously announced the Consumer Price Index had more than doubled the Bank of England's target. So the main thing in my head, it's not necessarily the day-to-day sort of issues that go on. Not suggesting they're not important, of course, and the government has definitely made mistakes, I think, in the past 2 weeks, as we all know. But I'm just thinking, at the next election, people are going to vote probably with what they think is better for their pockets, or, you know, what they think the current government has done wrong, you know, for their income. So.
And in many regards, though, I mean, it's quite difficult to work out when you're in the moment whether this is a significant moment. Maybe not necessarily for the electorate or for voters out there, but there is a sense that this may be a significant moment within the Conservative Party, within the parliamentary party.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously we heard this morning a little bit more sort of leaking out of Boris's quite sort of feisty meeting with the 1922 committee yesterday. I think a lot of those MPs, backbench MPs, not particularly happy about the government's approach to tackling down on the so-called sleaze, obviously second jobs, them not all being sleazy, of course. And it makes sense if you're, you know, a backbench MP who's quite comfortable in their position. They're not, you know, let's say a Bradford MP who is still sort of really on the campaign, even as they are in their seat, because they want to, you know, ensure that Labour doesn't take that seat back at the next election. You obviously are someone who's in a more secure position, and you might feel comfortable taking directorships or taking consultancy roles. And let's say you're, you know, an MP, middle-aged MP in that sort of position where you're able to take those roles, and you have, you know, 3-4 kids and they all go to private schools, the bill starts to add up, right? So they probably think to themselves, okay, you know, I want to be making a little bit more money on the side. Obviously, the issue is where the conflict of interest can come in to play, as it clearly did, unfortunately, with Owen Paterson.
Yeah, I think Andrew Rossendale was talking about people's lifestyles when it came to earning second jobs and stuff. Georgia, thank you very much indeed. Georgia Gilholy there, joining me on what Boris Johnson's been, I think we can say, a difficult week, not an ideal week for the Prime Minister. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, let's move on to dogs, because the government's announced plans to bring forward a new criminal offence for pet abductions in the Kept Animals Bill, which is currently going through Parliament. This new offence will see those who steal dogs jailed for up to 5 years. And it takes into account the emotional distress caused to both the owner and the dog. Well, joining me now is David Bowles. He's the Head of Public Affairs at the RSPCA. Good afternoon to you, David. Just what do you make, first of all, of this bill? Do you feel that it goes far enough? It's a welcome introduction?
Yeah, the RSPCA is delighted that the government has finally moved on bringing in a pet abduction offence for dogs. There's the possibility of widening that to other species. And we know that the pet theft has risen under COVID. Some insurers have said that it's about 20% rise. Pet theft was rising anyway before then. And what this offence does is 2 crucial things. Number one, it sends a very clear message to the police to investigate this crime, and to the courts that when somebody comes before them, that they will treat it seriously. And number two, it does a very important change, because it says that pets are much more than just property. They're different to fridges or washing machines. They are a loving part of the family, and therefore they should be treated as that loving part when theft is done. So hopefully this will send a very clear message, not just to the police and courts to take it seriously, but also to people that have until now made a lot of easy money out of other people's distress, that they need to move on to other things and leave dogs in particular alone.
Yeah, and this obviously comes, doesn't it, David, when we've seen an absolute explosion in the number of people owning dogs, millions more in the last kind of 2 years or so.
Absolutely. So we know under COVID that people, particularly people who had not had dogs before, wanted companionship. They wanted an excuse to go for a walk, and they wanted help with their mental awareness and mental health. And they chose dogs. And unfortunately, there weren't enough dogs in the UK to satisfy that demand. So prices doubled. Dogs being imported illegally from places like Romania and Ireland also increased enormously. And unfortunately, that also led to this increase in dog abduction, because opportunistic thieves saw an opportunity to make a lot of easy money off people's misery. The RSPCA had a couple of examples of people whose French bulldogs were stolen. One was stolen in Gloucester and ended up in Burnley, and another one was stolen in Northampton and ended up in Brighton. And that shows the lengths to which these dogs were moving around. Fortunately, both were microchipped, so we were able to reunite them with their owners. But in one case, 18 months had passed before that dog was reunited with its owner. So this is a really serious offence. And obviously for the dog owner themselves, this is an enormous impact on their lives.
David, I appreciate your thoughts, and you've missed, but our viewers have not, lots of pictures of very cute puppies on our screens. David, thank you very much indeed. David Bowles there from the RSPCA. Now, finally, let's move on to a really important subject, which is the government's conversion therapy prohibition bill, which is currently going through a 6-week consultation period. It aims to outlaw lawful treatments used on some gay people, but according to its critics, it could also effectively criminalise the idea of gender-critical views. Well, some MPs think it is time for change, others do not. Well, in a moment, we're speaking to an LGBTQ activist who backs the bill. First, let's speak to a group who penned a letter, actually, to MPs to rethink it all. We're joined by Maya Furstarter. She's the Executive Director of Sex Matters. Good afternoon to you. Why are you opposed to this bill? Why do you want MPs to reconsider things?
It's not just about gay conversion therapy. It's that the government is consulting on trying to outlaw both changes to someone's sexual orientation and changes to gender identity, particularly for children under the age of 18. So it's trying to outlaw therapy that would, if a child declares themselves to be transgender, and there's been a huge increase in children believing that they were born in the wrong body and that they are transgender at an early age, if a therapist then wants to explore with them, maybe there are other reasons why they're feeling that way about their body, that would also be outlawed and criminalised. Those therapists would be threatened with unlimited fines or 5 years in prison.
So essentially what you're saying is that you don't disagree with the kind of gay therapy bit, the gay conversion therapy bit, sorry, of it. It's your concern around transgender rights and the potential questions that may be asked if you are not an adult in this. But, you know, people would suggest that actually, in some ways, having the kind of the freedom to talk about these things is quite important, to try to seek advice outside the kind of, you know, when you're having to deal with people who are much older.
Absolutely. This is about the ability of children and parents to seek advice and to explore the reasons why, you know, they may be feeling discomfort about their body. And we know that the majority of children who are highly gender non-conforming at an early age and who often, you know, will play around with gender identity at an early age, many of them grow up to be gay or lesbian adults. They may not have, you know, understood it or thought about it as a child. They felt like they were different. They felt like they didn't fit in. And then they're being given a new narrative that says, you know, maybe you're not a boy, maybe you're a girl, or maybe you're not a girl, you're a boy. And so you have children who would grow up to be gay or lesbian adults being put on puberty blockers, which stop them from going through natural puberty, stop them from growing up mentally and physically, and sterilize them if they then go on to cross-sex hormones. You know, this is a kind of conversion therapy that's happening. And if therapists are not allowed to take the time to work through with those children. Why do they feel the way they feel? If those therapists are threatened with prisons or fines or being struck off, then those children are not going to have the time to work that through.
OK, Maya, thank you. That is the view there of Maya for starter. Well, let's get the views now on the other side of this argument. Emma Best joined us. Emma, what did you make of what Maya had to say there?
Good afternoon. Just wanted to start really by saying I can't really believe that I'm coming on your show to defend why it would be a good idea to ban conversion therapy, something that when the government took out its the biggest LGBT survey we've ever had in this country, we found out that 7% of respondents had suffered. And I want to be very clear, a lot of these arguments are massive red herrings. Conversion therapy has been banned in places like the US, Australia, Germany, Spain, just to mention a few. It's recommended by the UN that we implement this as well. The things about the therapist not being able to talk to patients, it's all red herrings. This is, globally, this has been put in place, and that hasn't occurred anywhere. So the idea that suddenly this is going to happen in UK and we're going to be locking up therapists left, right and centre is a complete red herring. I would suggest to probably push a different agenda, but actually what it's doing is it's detrimental to the whole LGBT community, and that's so many people that we're talking about. And so the very idea that we shouldn't be doing this is just mad, because it's happening here today in the UK. In 2017 there was a big investigation in Liverpool. A reporter went undercover into a church where they told him that to starve off gay thoughts, he had to starve himself for 3 days and had to conduct prayers saying things, about, for example, the devil is causing deceit within me and kill it now in the fire and all this stuff. So this is actually a real problem in the UK. And all these red herring arguments to push a separate agenda are really detracting from the fact that there is a massive community of people in this country that need this law.
When you say red herrings, what do you mean? I don't get what you mean.
So I've heard just now about that we're going to be locking up and fining therapists. So tell me, in the US, in Australia, in Germany, in Spain, across the globe, is that what's happening, where this law is already in place? It's not, by the way, but that's the red herring. So we're being told something that's just not true.
OK, Emma, thank you very much indeed. As I say, we always provide two sides of the coin here, Emma and Maya. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Always do get in touch. What do you think about that, and indeed any of the other issues we've been talking about today at GBViews at gbnews.uk, or indeed you can tweet me at GBNews. Now, let me tell you about next week, because next week we're going to be in Northern Ireland for a special week of programmes, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, broadcasting from Belfast, Enniskillen and Coleraine. Really keen to hear your views on what we should be discussing, talking about, who we should be talking to. Do get in touch. Me and Liam Halligan will be broadcasting live from Northern Ireland next week. That is it from me, though. Up next, it's Alex with the afternoon agenda. Won't want to miss that. Arlene Foster is in for me tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Have a nice afternoon. See you next week.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi there. There is a lot of cloud out there this afternoon and some rain in places, but it's also very mild. The weather at the moment coming from the west, it's a mild direction, and with a strong wind across the northern half of the country, that is bringing in a lot of cloud and also some persistent rain associated with these weather fronts that are close to the far north of Scotland, and it stays damp there overnight with the wind, if anything, strengthening, pushing the wet and windy weather into Shetland for a time. Gales and 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts for exposed parts of Shetland. Further outbreaks of rain into the north of Scotland by the end of the night as well. But otherwise, a lot of cloud for much of the UK. Some rain and drizzle for western hills and coasts, and staying mild with that breeze and with that cloud cover. There will be some breaks in the cloud first thing Friday, say towards central and increasingly eastern and northern areas, so northwest England could brighten up by the afternoon, for example. In many places there'll be a bit more sunshine compared to today, but for Scotland it stays cloudy, windy and in places damp, especially the far north. Another mild day is expected. 13, 14 Celsius generally. Again, we're likely to see something around 16 degrees for parts of eastern and northeastern Scotland, given the wind warming up as it pushes over the higher ground to the west. And the wet and windy weather continues for the north of Scotland into Friday night. But then things start to change. For Saturday, this weather front begins to sink south, and as it does so, it will introduce colder air. But Saturday certainly starts off mild across the country, cloudy again for most areas, with only some late brightness coming along for Scotland and Northern Ireland behind this weather front. So really, Saturday is a day of change, with that weather front sinking south, introducing eventually clearer skies, but also much lower temperatures. Those temperatures back to around average for Sunday and Monday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's new